While everyone else is tricking and treating, I'm buried up to my neck in game demos, and I don't know if you've ever been buried up to your neck before, but it's not pleasant. What if you have jock itch? I'm asking for a friend. Steam's triannual Next Festival has its peaks and valleys, but there's always at least one genre that shows up pretty big each season. In this fall edition, that genre happens to be one of my favorites: detective games. From point-and-click adventures to mystery boxes to logical deductions, there's a lot I liked from this selection, but there were certainly other genres with highlights as well, and I'll try to cover as much as I can. While the previous video was a bit of a shotgun blast, this time I'd like to go a tiny bit deeper on the demos I thought were the most interesting, while still giving a shout out to other demos that I maybe liked but didn't love. As always, taste is subjective. Some people might find the combination of poker and Danganronpa intensity of All in Abyss to be irresistible, while I found myself kind of indifferent to it. And for snobs that stick their nose up at pixel platformers, well, sorry, I got some on here. So here's a timestamp to skip that part. Oh, that's odd. The timestamp says D's nuts. Well, I guess you just have to suck it up and endorse some fun platformers, you villain. Let's get right into it. I'll start with one of my favorite demos, Urban Myth Dissolution Center. It's by the developer of Makoto Wakaido's Case Files trilogy, and it uses a similar engine, but it expands the gameplay and scope to the point that Case Files feels like a prototype in comparison. While we've had a lot of anime-inspired detective games, it's rare to see one influenced by series like Ghost Hunt or Dark Gathering. See, you're not really chasing down criminals in Dissolution Center, you're tracking down urban legends and disproving them, which is somewhat awkward for Azami, as her best friend is caught in the middle of one and it's become larger than life. Between each trip to the crime scene, you have the opportunity to scour social media to find suspicious comments that might lead you to the source of a myth, and your chief has the supernatural ability to deduce specific myths and their histories. Azami is no slouch herself, as she can see into the past and make deductions based on the context of the ghostly images. Given the nature of this particular subgenre, I do feel like the mysteries will somewhat be solved outside of your control, but I still think the pixel art presentation and story are worth experiencing. As I mentioned before though, it's not the only quality detective game in the festival. There's Murder at the Birch Tree Theater, for example, a Golden Idol-like set in a seemingly cursed off-Broadway playhouse that befalls one crime after another. Much like Golden Idol, you'll be assembling a stack of words by clicking around, checking people's pockets, and reading letters. And then you'll head over to the solve screen to identify the players and the events as they unfolded. It's unabashedly a clone, but that's hardly a bad thing in this early era of copycats. We didn't go from Mario right to Banjo-Kazooie after all. We had Gianna Sisters and Commander Keen and Alex Kidd, and those were fine in their own right. Well, some of them anyway. Hey, speaking of platformers, that's right, I'm wheeling them in already! MainFrames is a cute puzzle platformer set inside of an operating system as you control both the protagonist and the windows they jump between. The mechanics are super easy to understand, and it'll definitely get more and more fiendish over time. Despite what you might think, this game controls just fine on a controller, no mouse needed. The right analog stick switches between the windows, and sometimes the protagonist's own actions influence what happens inside of them. It's all very cleverly designed and should be a fun little romp when it releases in early 2025. Altered Alma and Rat Trap Fusum make up our Metroidvania quota for this section, as Rat Trap involves wheeling around in a hamster ball as a little mouse in a giant laboratory gone amok, and sometimes the only way to stop robots is to join them. You'll find robotic limbs scattered around the laboratory that can be fused to your hamster ball, each with their own abilities like a blaster arm, a torso with a boxing glove arm, and legs for extra jump height. You don't need to be fused to them all the time, however. You can split apart to solve puzzles, and sometimes your limbs will have unique abilities when isolated. It's a cool idea executed decently, but I'm curious to know how long the full game can keep up momentum once you've already gotten all the parts together. Altered Alma, on the other hand, is a cyberpunk Metroidvania with some fun in-game cutscenes and a unique traversal option called the Quantum Blade. In addition to being a weapon, you can throw it into walls, ceilings, or just a bad guy's stomach and warp directly to them. You're trying to get a spaceship crew together so you can escape from Neo Barcelona, where the protagonist Jack is a bit of a fugitive. This crew can be romanced as well, so there's a little something for everyone, I guess. Look, just a couple more and I'll move on, okay? Just put the gun away. That's only gonna hurt your monitor, unless it's a light gun. Is it a light gun? There's a light gun roguelite in this festival called Blunderbusted, but I didn't have a chance to try it. Okay, sorry. There's Symphonia, which kind of reminds me of the old UbiArts platformers like Rayman Origins and Valiant Hearts. It's very momentum-based and could be a decent pickup if the level design maintains some puzzle variety. There's Aokaki, which is an 8-bit ninja platformer, not an image board. The aesthetics were on point, but it didn't thrill me overall. Wings of Endless is a bit generic looking, but actually played pretty decently for a Metroidvania. I think that could be a sleeper. Lastly, there's Chronicles of the Wolf, an obvious Symphony of the Night nod that's actually pretty fun to play, if you can get past the incredibly janky menuing and awkward button mapping. But maybe you're more in the mood for a puzzle game. Well, head on down to the Depot. Puzzle Depot, that is, because it's got a slick Amiga-inspired art style and some quality box and crate pushing. While not quite as open as, say, Isles of Sea and Sky, you still have what are essentially dungeon-style maps to traverse, full of puzzles and optional objectives. These objectives don't currently award you anything other than a higher score, so I'd like to see if the full game could offer some sort of fun unlock for doing them, even if it's pointless cosmetics or something. If you want something a little more like Jigsaw, I'm not really into torture punishments. That's cool if it's your thing, though. If you want something a little more like a Jigsaw puzzle, then try Wilmot Works It Out, a charming little side story to Wilmot's warehouse that has you sorting and solving various puzzle deliveries that not only have the pieces mixed up, but also have pieces from other puzzles mixed in. I wasn't sure how the Wilmot gameplay would translate to something like this, but it actually works pretty well. You can attach 4 different pieces to yourself and then attach pieces to those pieces if you want. And once you've finished a puzzle, you can hang it up on your wall. I'm not expecting the full game to be all that long, the wall doesn't have a ton of room on it, and my finished demo playtime was 10 minutes, so I would expect this to only be a couple of hours long. But if you're okay with that, I think it'll be worth your time, even at $15. Now, Wilmot is published by Thinky, who has published a ton of bangers over the years, from Tunic to Night in the Woods to I Was a Teenage Exocolonist, so when I learned that Thinky had a new game in the festival and it was developed in-house, I had to try it. Usual June is an intriguing mix of narrative storytelling and stylish hack-and-slash action that takes place in a once sleepy town that's now gone all sideways. June can see and speak to the dead, and after bringing a mysterious machine to life, gets sucked over into the ghost realm to fight nasty creatures and help stop the apocalypse from happening. It's got great style and energy, although I don't think the Spider-Verse style choppy animation really works in this format. Unless it's on 3s or 4s, and I'm going by the usual 24 frames per second timing here, then it just looks like a technical error, especially at 60 frames per second. They may just want to smooth it out entirely. I also think that the action could use a lock-on ability as well, but it's a promising look so far, and hopefully it will continue to build on this for its release in 2025. Another excellent narrative game in the festival is Great God Grove, which might be one of the most popular demos I've talked about to this point, but it's got that hype for a reason. It's an incredibly charming adventure about healing the many fractured relationships of the gods using a tool that literally dropped out of the sky and into your lap. You can slurp up word balloons and then fire them at other people to solve puzzles, or just see what their comical reactions will be. The art direction is phenomenal, though it does come at a slight performance cost that I hope they can optimize before they're released next month. And there's all sorts of fun characters to talk to and poke fun at. If they can work out the little kinks here and there, I think Great God Grove could be a cult classic. For something a little twitchier, here's a game I haven't seen anyone talk about yet, Candy Rangers. It's an on-rail shooter that utilizes color matching, with each color-coded ranger assigned to a different face button. Each ranger's weapon also covers wide ranges in certain directions, whether horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. It's a really clever idea, and you'll be kept on your toes a lot, because you're racing against the clock and any enemy that hits you deducts time, but getting your score multiplier up will refill the clock. Combined with jumping and swinging and can kicking, there's a lot of stuff to juggle, and I know it'll get ridiculously hectic in later worlds. The music is nice and bouncy, and the visuals are cute and vibrant, with a little splash picture unlocking after every stage if you get a high enough score. Little surprises like this are why I love Next Fest. I'd also like to talk about Wormhole. I was actually reached out to personally about this game, and I can see why, because it's got that crunchy 1-bit aesthetic and catchy chiptunes, and it's a really satisfying take on Snake-style gameplay. You're a cosmic worm devouring planets and enemies, and the only real threats are keeping your combo alive, running into walls, and your own tail. Now, you can hit walls on occasion, but do it too often and you'll die of nosebleed. There are star trails that will lead to a screen-clearing supernova if you pick them all up in order, and of course the titular wormholes that warp you around the field. For a while I was really cruising without really dying, but the level design slowly ramps up and gets a lot trickier as you grow and grow. There are perks you can choose between every stage that can help, from shortening your tail to increasing planet spawns. The branching path design is not my particular favorite, but it will definitely encourage replayability. You won't have to wait long for this one because it comes out on the 30th. But where are all the detective games, you cry out? I did promise more, didn't I? Well, let's start with Mindcop, a surreal ticking clock murder mystery where you have the power to enter people's minds and see various facets of their hidden selves. Each action of investigation you take drains clock, kind of like Death Trick Double Blind's action point system, so you'll have to be careful not to chase red herrings. I know this kind of gameplay doesn't suit everyone, some people feel that it's a punishment for exploring, but if the game makes the smart and stupid choices relatively clear, then it doesn't bother me too much. This extends to interviews, where you will get a series of choices of things to ask, and whichever one you didn't pick, forget about it, it's gone. To unlock a person's mind, you have to succeed at this color-matching minigame, where 3 in a row will extend the time limit and push your little surfer closer to the finish line. And then you'll get to look behind 3 doors, a truth, a lie, and an uncertainty. In the demo, I was allowed to see all 3, so I don't know if they'll make it a single choice in the full game. With this many restrictions, it's really going to come down to the game design. I'm also a tiny bit wary of mystery games that are comedic because I feel like the comedy always takes priority over the actual mystery, but hopefully they take this seriously enough to create something captivating and exciting. Mindcop releases on November 14th. This next one is not really a looker, but I hope you stick with it because it's pretty interesting. The Murder Hotel is a detective game with major Ryukishi 07 vibes, so I guess not being a looker just plays into that. But with a focus on the actual murder mystery instead of whatever Tea Party Toho murder shit was going on in Umineko. Look, a lot of people kept telling me it was the best postmodern work since House of Leaves, and that really set me up to hate it. You can't blame me too much. Anyway, like Umineko, you've got murders happening with seemingly perfect locked rooms, and the hotel's owner, Gastfinger, claims to be the one behind them all, which is easy to believe because he carries giant scissors like it's fucking Nightcry. This hotel is actually a dream world that our protagonist Marin is stuck in after a plane crash, and in order to escape, he has to pin these crimes on one of the human guests in the hotel. Already I'm intrigued, especially because there is a chance that a human did commit these crimes. In the investigation phase, you'll be collecting clues, talking to suspects, and constructing theories. You ask questions by forming sentences out of the words available to you, and of course, people won't even respond to idiotic ones, but any reasonable sentence will usually get some sort of response, which will yield color-coded clues. Red clues are sort of factual observations, while green clues are more theoretical. Once you've run out of time, you'll go to a demon courtroom and break apart your opponent's theory while hopefully proving your own. There's more going on here, just like Umineko, there's a lot of additional demons in the background, and that can start to get a little silly. There's cheat clues if you form a pact with a particular demon, and there's these stealth segments that happen sort of outside the simulation, so to speak. Just a lot of different gameplay elements that are really interesting, so long as you can put up with some wonky character portraits and top-down segments that look like Gaia Online. The Murder Hotel opens its doors in April. If the detective subgenre has an uncle, it's definitely the point-and-click adventure, and there were a couple that caught my eye in the festival. AngelGaze is a heady sci-fi adventure with EGA graphics inspired by the earlier days of LucasArts, and it's a gorgeous and atmospheric trip with some major issues to watch out for. This one really got off on the wrong foot for me because the very first puzzle is a horrific pixel hunt, and I do mean single pixel. A single pixel that shimmers slightly when the camera moves. Hey, developer? Are you being a wise ass or something? You know this sucks, right? On top of that, the character doesn't really have anything unique to say when using the various verbs on scenery, so I was ready to write this one off. And to be fair, I haven't completely written this one on either, but I think it does merit some investigation because I really like the artwork, the other puzzles are nowhere near as ridiculous, and the protagonist seems to be talking to someone behind the player, like Francis talks to Zack in Deadly Premonition. There's this concept mechanic that could be pretty cool where you combine ideas to form new perspectives, although it was a little limited in the demo portion. I'm curious to see where this one goes, but I'll probably wait on reviews first. If you've played through the Riven remake and want something similar, consider looking into the upcoming Amerzone Remake. I'm not normally someone that gets super into remakes and remasters, but even I have to admit the original Amerzone is pretty freaking dated. It's a Benoit Sakal game, that's the Siberia creator, rest in peace, which has major issues on modern computers and looks like if you took a real player video from 1994 and resized it to fill the screen. So bringing it into the modern era in the same way Cyan has with Riven is honestly a good idea, even if I can trust microids as far as I can throw them. But luckily, they've done a good job with this one. It's not quite on the level of the Riven remake, but it's still quite nice visually, maybe somewhere around a mid-era PS4 game, which is all I really need for a first-person adventure. The remake retains the node-by-node travel, which might seem a little awkward, but you can double-click to skip animations and really warp around if you want to. I've played the Eyes of Ara before, so I'm already used to this kind of modernized, misty interface. It feels like they're going to do right by Sakal's legacy, and that's all anyone can ask for. Lastly, there's Noiramore Academy, which is not literally a point-and-click adventure, but functions as one for all intents and purposes. You play a petty little shit of a schoolgirl who's constantly getting in trouble for pranks and mischief, trying to solve a puzzle left behind by a staffer's former friend, and there might be more secrets hidden within the walls of the school than they'd care to admit. The gameplay is sort of like an early Telltale game. I'm talking Sam and Max, not Walking Dead. There's inventory items to use, as well as a couple of unique powers like levitation. The full game sounds like there might be a murder mystery at play too, so it could go some interesting places. Mostly I enjoy interacting and talking with everything and everyone. Especially after AngelGaze, it was nice to see a demo so full of detail and world building. This one is pretty far off. It's got a Kickstarter and won't be out until late 2026, so I'll probably be revisiting this one in a future Next Fest video. While there were a few first-person shooters in the festival, the ones that caught my eye were decidedly melee-focused. Hail to the Rainbow takes some inspiration from Half-Life, as well as the developer's previous games like 35mm, to portray a Russian wasteland devastated by a robotic apocalypse as you go from location to location just trying to survive. You've got some sort of AI in your head, a drone to pilot, random stuff to scavenge, and robots to brain with a wrench. It's intriguing even if it seems like it will be more vignette to vignette than a seamless story. The atmosphere is great already, though I will have to see if this small developer can pull off the scale of a larger game. Then there's Butcher's Creek by the developer of Dusk and Iron Lung. With a VHS camcorder aesthetic, you might be forgiven for thinking that this will be some sort of creepypasta game, but it's actually a fairly brutal video nasty tribute to Condemned, with a lot of the same clocking of skulls with pipes and hammers. The premise is kinda out there. There's some sort of ritualistic cult killing people in the woods, and you're a depraved pervert that just wanted to find some adult videotapes and got caught. These tapes function in two ways, not the ways you're thinking. You can use them with TVs, again, not the way you're thinking, to save your game. Okay, we all chill? Having 5 or more of them in your inventory will increase your maximum health, because I guess you're powered by horny energy or something. Since the cultists took all your stuff, including your shoes, you have to watch out for broken glass on the floor, not just to avoid alerting enemies, but to protect your precious toes. This one is grungy and bleak, but I still think it could be a good time, and based on previous games by the developer, should be available for cheap when it comes out. As always, there are demos that didn't quite make the cut, but I'd like to still give them a shout out here. Super Sammy Roll 2 is a sequel to the cute but maddeningly tough 3D platformer that looks to be offering a lot more visual variety to the stage design for those who can handle its mechanics better than I can. Wheelborne is an absolutely ridiculous third-person action game about an armadillo-like creature on wheels that beats up other creatures to take their wheels. It really has to be experienced to be believed. Chrono Crimes has you traveling back in time to eavesdrop on murder suspects without getting caught, while Dino Cop is a comedic investigation game whose political allegory is maybe a little too on the nose for my liking. Super Reactor is sort of a combination between Sound Dodger and Irritating Stick, where you collect orbs by squashing and stretching while avoiding touching anything with your sides. I'm just a bit too clumsy to get super far in it myself. Trials of Innocence is a surprisingly competent Ace Attorney clone with decent character animations and a solid mystery, though its localization could use further polishing. Honestly, I could keep going. And I will! As a Patreon bonus feature next week, I'll have a backer-only video going over even more demos and why some of them didn't resonate with me as much. I kinda need more time to play them. You've seen my video output, right? Next week on the main channel, I'll be talking about some of the upcoming November indie games, including a few that were in this video. And later in November, I'll be talking about Phoenix Springs, and my Patreon's Voter's Choice, which you can vote on now if you're a member. Some of the choices include The Legend of Dragoon, Tail Concerto, Guilt, and more. So join the Patreon today if you want a say in what I play. Or just like and subscribe to the channel here, and I'll keep the videos coming. You can also get in the credits if you pledge $3. Until next time, you'll find me in another castle.